So let's talk a little bit about Offrs.com, how it got started, just to kind of understand a little bit the trajectory of what's happened over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, about 4 years ago, I think we came together and we identified that there was a major gap in the industry, that there's no technology or no systems in place to help realtors identify actual seller listings. So when we first started talking, we talked about the best way to, formulate a system to go ahead and automate that function. And I think we came to the conclusion that it was going to be a data-driven decision. So that's where we started, was by identifying data and algorithms and building our initial algorithms and working with PhDs to release the first version of Offrs.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of where people are, always are interested in, new technologies, and the words predictive analytics and big data are thrown around quite a bit, but very few people really understand it. So let's talk a little bit about, what is it, what's underneath that? When you talk about predictive analytics and big data, what are we really talking about, and how do we leverage that to do predictive analytics for seller listings, as an example?
Well, predictive analytics is really all about taking past behavior and projecting to the future to identify what's most likely to happen next. So the way that we do that is we work with a team of PhDs to crunch numbers and crunch consumer trends, consumer behavior in every single territory across the country, which allows us to be very accurate as we make our projections for the properties who are most likely to sell in the next 12 months.
Right. So really the way to boil that down is, if you're going to make a better decision on what's going to happen in the future, whether it be you're going to spend some dollars on marketing, or you're going to go door knocking, or you're going to send out a direct mail, or you're going to do phone calls, whatever the prospecting behavior is going to be for the agent, it's better to start with prospects that are more likely to sell than not, and that's really kind of the basics of what predictive analytics is about.
Sure, it's just being smart with your time and your money.
Right.
And the way you do that is by utilizing math and algorithms.
That makes sense. And so after kind of the big data and turning that into an algorithm, and then of course delivering that information to agents, what's kind of the next step? Because of course identifying prospects or potential listings in a neighborhood is still far from actually getting that listing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think we learned early on that having the data, having the math, having the algorithms just wasn't enough for the average agent. So what we really needed to do is figure out how they formed relationships with people. And I don't know if any organization out there has ever done as much research on the act of prospecting as we have. But I think what we really learned through trial and error is that agents really do use 6 different touch types to form relationships with home sellers. And what we needed to do is we had a big challenge on our plate, is how do we incorporate that into a platform so we can have a systematic approach to forming relationships with homeowners through phone, email, text messaging, digital advertising, handwritten notes, and hosting events, and what messaging was successful and what wasn't. So part of being a data company and part of being a big data company is being able to see what's working and actually producing the results we want, and then being able to incorporate that same messaging and the same actions that produce the positive result and making it available for all of our clients.
Right, and that's really what it's about, right? It's about not only improving your odds for success, but like we've mentioned before, that one statistic that's really driving really the entire vision of the business when it first started was that over 70% of property owners are going to choose the first agent despite any other factors.
Right.
And so being first in the door is almost as critical as even having 20 years in real estate experience.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's no greater advantage that we could give to anyone than allowing them to be the first person in the door. And with our new product set is we actually verify that someone is going to be selling in the next 12 months. And the reality is, if someone's going to sell, that gives you a lot of opportunities to form a relationship with that person.
Right. So let's talk about that verification, because there is, as there's multiple companies in the space that are doing predictive analytics, or at least claim to be. And then of course data is available, so even agents themselves probably download property data and try to figure out who they should target. Of course, really there's more to that than just identifying the property owner. Then we talked about the outreach. So whether you're sending out direct mail or doing phone campaigns, which is costly, but even with smart data, it's still a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of work. So taking that off the shoulder of the agent is probably very important to that.
Right? I mean, as far as direct mail is concerned, I mean, based on all the campaigns that we've run and all the industry experts that we've talked to, I mean, you're talking about a very low conversion marketing channel there, and it's very expensive when you start adding up all the costs and then the time perspective and then the design and then the action of actually sending it out and mailing it out. I mean, you're looking at something that may convert at 1 or 2 hand raisers out of 1,000.
Right.
So there is no amount of data that can change a conversion channel or a marketing channel that converts at such a low percentage. Right. So, I mean, it's a very tough way to build your business if you're going to sit back with that old line thinking and saying, hey, look, I'm just going to sit back, I'm going to spend $3,000 on direct mail, and that's how I'm going to brand myself, and everyone in this neighborhood is going to know, who I am. I mean, the reality is that technology is changing this business, and there's a smarter way to go about forming relationships and growing a business and building a business using scalable models. And I think that's a big thing that we learned early on, is that there's a certain segment of this population that's okay with just doing 4 or 5 transactions a year, and that's great, and they can continue to operate as they have in the past. But the reality is that someone who wants to scale and build a business, they're going to need the tools and the systems and the processes in place, and that's what Offrs.com and Roof are bringing to the table.
Yeah, and that's a good point to make too. Is it's not just about leveraging kind of new technologies like predictive analytics, but it's also, quite honestly, leveraging technologies that a lot of agents haven't really tried out, or at least they haven't done it in the right way. We're still stuck in that mentality of, like you said, direct mail and door knocking,
right,
and evolving into sophisticated marketing campaigns and really understanding, like you just mentioned, conversion metrics, which may not even be in the vocabulary of a lot of businesses today, is kind of part of it too. It's evolving not only who you're targeting, but how you're actually reaching out to them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the reality is that there's so many different types of marketing channels that realtors can utilize, and so many technology and so many tools out there that they can utilize. But most of these people are small businesses, and they're starting at a place where they may have 1 or 2 ISAs or a very small team, but their goal ultimately is, a lot of them as entrepreneurs, is to go and build a massive team or be number 1 in the market or build a company. And they need a lot of guidance from a technology perspective to know what the right tools are to incorporate. And in most circumstances, we found that most of them need a lot of guidance as far as identifying the metrics that are really important for most businesses, such as the cost of customer acquisition, the conversion of hand raisers, in every single different type of advertising channel, whether it's a Google ad campaign or a Facebook campaign, social media campaign, handwritten note. There's very few places for them to go to be able to understand and learn about their business and about their customers. And without that knowledge, without that information, it's very, very difficult to know where to put your money and what advertising avenues to invest in order to maximize your results and ultimately grow a business.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're really talking about, why do you market to begin with, right? It's to scale your business.
Right.
And so when you're looking at everything from, we like to think of things as a funnel. When you think of things at the top of the funnel, you're like, that's how I'm going to ultimately generate my leads, whether it be Google, Facebook, online ads, direct mail, whatever it might be. And then as you get into the middle of the funnel, you start to identify those hand raisers, and then you want to give them a strong call to action, right, in order for them to engage with your brand. And then, of course, the bottom of the funnel, which we'll talk about later, is really about closing that lead, about
right,
building the relationship and taking that person who you don't know and then put them into the bucket of somebody that actually knows you and acknowledges you and actually trusts you, and then ultimately is going to use you to sell their home.
Right. And then, the value of those people going forward once you have that relationship, from referrals and everything else that comes with it, and then also the ability to attract buyers with listings. So, what we found is that the average listing is actually worth 4 transactions, right? You get to sell the home, you get to represent the seller in the purchase of their next property, and then you find 2 more buyers. So what's the true value of a seller lead? What's the true value of a listing?
Right. And then, of course, the idea that you actually then are able to circle prospect and then
right,
leverage that to even grow even further your market share in that neighborhood.
Right. And all of that requires a lot of processes,
yeah,
a lot of data, a lot of systems.
So it's fair to say that, when you really look at a real estate business, it all basically comes down to generating those listings, and then everything can grow from there. Once you start locking down those listings and locking down those people in that neighborhood, it ultimately starts to flourish your brand and ultimately leads to scaling your business.
Absolutely. I mean, listings are 100% the most important part of the real estate industry. I mean, those that control the listings and those that prove themselves to be the market expert with the homeowners, in a specific area, are the ones that ultimately control the market.